Good morning to each and every one of you. We would like to welcome you to present results third quarter 2023. My name is Juliana Vergara, Director of Relationship with Investors. Through this platform, we have the Q&A icon, so you can ask your questions and they'll be answered at the end. This session is being recorded today. We have Juan Manuel Rojas, CEO of Promigas, Aquiles Mercado, Financial Vice President, and all the team of managers of the company. So I would like to give the floor to our CEO. Thank you very much, Juliana. Good morning. As always, it is a pleasure to greet you and to know that you're here with us as you do every quarter. Today, we have the presentation of results, which has been divided in three different sections. The first part, the relevant figures with financial results, operational results, and we will underscore El Niño phenomenon. In the second part of the presentation, we will emphasize the strategy being implemented at the organization in order to increase competitiveness. Mainly the way we are behaving in the new businesses of low emissions, energy solutions, mobility, what we are doing when it comes to efficiency and productivity in business. And this is cost and expenses adjustment that we have been putting in place. Also, the part on synergies, which have been giving excellent results, and the impact on sustainability and the social footprint that we are having in Promigas. At last, we are going to conclude with financial results, and there, our CFO, Aquiles Mercados, will present the financial figures. Well, in order to start, I want to present relevant figures. Here, I would like to emphasize on the fact that we keep on overcoming our expectations regarding our budget, or exceeding our expectations. Let's see how can we achieve operational efficiencies, cost and expense reduction, which will enable us to close this year with favorable figures above what was expected, responding not only to our investors, but to the communities in which we operate. On this slide, I want to highlight three main topics. The first one, our income during the first quarter and what's accrued up to September. It would seem they present a slight reduction, and that is due to the fact that the last quarter of 2022, we received an exceptional payment for the indemnity of Promi Oriente. Even so, when we look at the figures into details, we have been able to compare them effectively. That is how, in the third quarter, we were 7% below what was estimated. That is 88 billion pesos below what we were expecting to spend, and we have accrued 200 billion of lower expenses, so that's 8% below the budget. 3.24, actually trillion if it's Colombian pesos. So that 8%, without any doubt, it brings me to the second message of this slide. It is reflected in a better EBITDA. The positive results of strict cost and expense control has enabled us to execute the EBITDA in the third quarter, and that's 5%, 30 trillion versus the budgeted figure. And by September, an EBITDA on $90 trillion above the budget. So this is being translated into a profit of 50 trillion above the budget. Regarding this year, 357 trillion accumulated. So that's an execution of 7%, and we feel very satisfied of this. I do not want to finish this slide without mentioning a third message that is relevant. And that is, as we have been mentioning in the different calls, how one of the competitive advantages of Promigas and its group of company lies on the balanced distribution that in which we produce the EBITDA and that profit. And that is seen once again in the third quarter in the accrued figures for the year. So in the consolidated gas transmission, regasification account for 52% of our EBITDA, while distribution and low emission businesses account for 48%. While in the profit, something similar happens, but it's actually the opposite. Gas transmission, regasification, and producer service account for 48% of profit, while gas transmission, electricity, energy solution businesses, and non-banking financing account for 52% of profit. So that's a balanced risk in the company, and that is quite good news. Individually, if we place Promigas standalone, we realize that in the third quarter of this year, we had a result that is 30 trillion Colombian pesos above income, and in the accrued figure, we are also complying with what Promigas had budgeted this year. If we take a look at cost and expenses in Promigas accumulated, when the strict cost and expense control is being met, in the year, we are between 170 compared to 180. So we are complying with an EBITDA thanks to this policy above the budget, 7% above the budget in the accrued figure, 6 billion versus what was budgeted. So that is reflected in a net profit of Promigas, which is 7% above the budget in 170 billion pesos. Again, 710 that we had in our budget, exceeding our expectations. If we go to the operational results on the following slide, we see also favorable results. And here, I would like to dwell on the left-hand side of the slide to underscore that in the third quarter of 2023, Promigas and its transmission companies attained 493 million cubic feet per day. So that's 3,290 kilometers. And you can see the capacity per day. Why were we below the figure we had budgeted? Mainly because we had transportation or transmission in Promioriente, Transmetano, and Transoccidente, while the volumes in Promigas were quite satisfactory. Now, we can say with clarity that this last quarter of the year, and given El Niño phenomenon, we have been transported important volumes above the expected figure. Having said this, even though we have 12 million cubic feet of transported gas average by the end of the year versus the budget, transmission income had an increase of 10% if you compare it to the same period, July-September 2022 with July-September 2023. It's not on the slide, but during that period, during the quarter, if we compare one quarter with the other, we go from 428 billion last year in the period July-September to 472 billion in the period July-September 2023. And as to the accrued figure, between January and September, we had an increase of 4%, moving from 1 trillion in January-September 2022 to 1,500,000,000 from January to September. That's also an important increase in transmission revenues. Also, an increase in thermal consumption during the third quarter, given El Niño phenomenon, that thermal support with respect to energy demand made that in September, 300 million cubic feet per day were transported to the thermal system. So that's 26% the budgeted figure, and 222% versus the volume we had budgeted. As a result of El Niño phenomenon, on the next slide, we're going to show that during the third quarter, as we showed, we regasified 65 days, not continuous day, and that's compared to the 22 days in 2022. That's in the third quarter of the year. And during the first 9 months of the year, we regasified during 109 days. And that was 300-something% compared to the same period, 2022. So that's an over execution of 441% with respect to our budget. As to distribution of gas and electricity, 6,660,000 customers by September. And later on, we'll see that we have reconnected more than 318,000 new households to our gas, to our distribution system, and also electricity, something that is quite satisfactory given the social footprint that this implies. And of those 6,660,000 customers, 6,220,000 correspond to gas users in Colombia and Peru, and 445,000 correspond to this electricity distribution customers, mainly in the Department of Cauca in Colombia. As to the distribution business income, these had important variables of 10% between the third quarter 2022 and the third quarter 2023, going from 960 billion to 1 trillion something, 100 million more than the past year. And we are very satisfied with the first this year compared to the first 9 months of 2022. As to the accrued figure, the variation reaches a growth of 16%, going from 2.7 trillion to 3 trillion in the first 9 months. We're very happy with that too. Emphasizing the portfolio of low emissions, we would like to highlight that in the third quarter, we accumulate contracted capacity of 79.5. There is a mistake on the slide. Megawatts, 64.3 megawatts correspond to a solar energy photovoltaic, and 15.3 megawatts to self-generation. It is worth highlighting that we also serve 42,000 megawatts to third parties. We provide them service and maintenance, and we're very happy with that. In details regarding the things that we highlight, which were milestones for this third semester, we had long and short-term ratings. It's AAA in Colombia and F1 in Colombia by Fitch, and also the international rating BBB minus. As to discipline and operational excellence, I want to highlight that in the Peru business, there was an increase in resource allocation through the program Compunche Peru, adding $33.6 million for a total of $80.6 million, with which we are building networks of 850 kilometers, in addition to what we had anticipated to benefit 66,000 new customers. We are the organization in Peru which is receiving more contributions from the government because they believe in our management and execution capacity in order to connect communities that are in need of energy in Peru. I would like to highlight that Surtigas manages public resources for a total of 7.4 million to finance new connections in the departments of Bolívar, Córdoba, and Sucre. And we have entered into agreement with the Governor's Office of Sucre and a promotion fund in order to provide services to an important number of customers in the Department of Sucre. And also on September 6th, we started the transfer of gas from the Promigas gas pipeline to the TGI gas pipeline. I mean, connecting the Caribbean pipeline with that of the central part of the country. What's the difference between this fact and what we announced in April regarding early bidirectionality? We had reported the connection of both systems, but the flows were coming from the system of the interior part of the country to the Atlantic coast. With the operational problems of Canacol in August, we were able to take gas flows from the coast of the Caribbean to the interior part of the country. And we believe that is very important because bidirectionality is operating in a safe and efficient manner. I also would like to highlight as a relevant milestone the progress in our project Plus Seguridad with DuPont, which have been translated into a reduction of LTIFAR and accidents compared to the third quarter 2022. In September, there was a reduction of 26% that we're going to see later on, and a reduction of 40% in total accident rate. As events and recognitions, we have the last September 5, we were able to carry out the presentation of the edition number 24 of the natural gas sector report in Colombia, which addresses the challenges of the energy trilemma in the country. We offered a presentation, one in which we warned about the problems being faced around gas availability in certain areas of the country. And also we highlighted what could happen if in Colombia, we will quickly abandon natural gas, which was well received by the industry and by public opinion. It is worth mentioning that we are part of the top 30 regarding ANDI in National Innovation Ranking. We are ranked number 12 in the top 30. And in the Department of Atlántico, we were acknowledged as the most innovative company in the ANDI, ANDI. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. I had mentioned up front El Niño phenomenon. And here, as I have previously mentioned, I would like to highlight that the infrastructure, transmission infrastructure that we have at SPEC has indicated that we are the energy, quote unquote, insurance of the country. That infrastructure has been supplemented with the bidirectionality, hence the SPEC volumes that are regasified are enabling us to take gas to the interior part of the country. And we are very happy about it because we have evidence that that infrastructure is very important to Colombia. Well, we can say that up to September 30th, we have had 12 methane vessels with 618,000 cubic meter of LNG received at the end of the third quarter. That's above what we had received last year. 300 million cubic feet per day of their volume transported during September 2023, 66% above budgeted. On September 21, SPEC presented a historical record of regasified volume, 305 million cubic feet per day. So by the end of the year, we'll see that we have surpassed this figure in the last quarter, but by September 30th, I'm sorry, correction of the speaker, on September 21, 305 million cubic feet. The regasification can regasify 400 million cubic feet per day, 339 million cubic feet per day transported volume on September 24th, the highest peaking volume of the year. And in September, SPEC represented 40% of gas deliveries on the coast and 20% nationally. Thus, ratifying, as I previously mentioned, that the regasification plant is not only critical to the country, but that this plant, with respect to El Niño phenomenon, is fundamental in order to give reliability to the Colombian electric sector. Since September today, around 23 million cubic feet per day have been transported into the interior through bidirectionality. Part of that gas is received by SPEC. So this slide is to emphasize how have we been supporting the country's electric power through our regasifying plant, which has also given excellent results as to reliability. Now, I would like to emphasize the result of the safety project, which is called Más Seguridad. This is indeed fundamental for the safety and reliability of our operations. As to safety, we have had transmission gases 1% below what's required by authorities. This quarter is 0.14, so it's below what's required. And the efficiency in energy supply is 100%. And if we take a look at IFR, by September, he had a reduction of 26% compared to the same period in 2022, and a reduction of 40%. 40% reduction in total accidents compared to the same period in 2022. We had 116 in 2023 versus 192 in 2022. And none of them turned into disabilities. As you can take a look at the left-hand side of the graph regarding LTIFR. So the work being done in this area is excellent. Now let's move on to the businesses that allow us to increase our competitiveness regarding growth for the future. And here I would like to highlight the business of energy solutions and then mobility. As to energy solutions, the results are quite favorable. At September 30th, we have been complying with 91% of the goal set for the year, reaching 79.5 megawatts, while in the year we had proposed 80. The estimated figure for year end, by the end of 2023, is going to be above that figure. So we are going to comply with that. In addition to the 79.5 megawatts, we also have 42 megawatts to third parties, 42 megawatts in the area of operation and maintenance. As to energy sales, 45.1 gigawatt hour. The solar projects that we have been putting in place, some of them are work in progress, some of them in closed contracts. We have operational 34.5. So the solar project have implied a reduction of 12,100 tons of CO2. That's equivalent per year. And as to gas use in cogeneration, we said that we had 15.2 megawatts. We are using 7.4 million cubic meter. That's as to the capex anticipated for these projects. We have executed 47.5%, so we have to execute 53% before the year end. We hope to comply with this goal. Hence, this is a business that is increasingly growing in an efficient manner as a result of an important commercial activity which is being conducted by the Group of Energy Solutions. And the idea is to propose a solution to our customers that will enable them to decarbonize their emissions. In our area of influence, GDO on Surtigas, we have an increase of 27% regarding reconversion for the same quarter versus the past semester. 541 conversions of light vehicles to CNG in northern Peru, 943 conversions in the Surtigas and GDO areas, and 24 new units of vehicles dedicated to CNG during the third quarter. We must recall that each one of those vehicles, what we call tractocamiones, they represent between 300 and 400 connected households. So each truck has an impact on the consumption of gas. As you can see, we are moving in this area, attaining excellent results. Now, I would like to show what we have been doing when it comes to cost and operational excellence. And here I'm going to dwell on this because it is thanks to this project and to the strict compliance of our policy to capture synergies, to control cost and expenses. This is how we have been able to be above the budget this year in our EBITDA and in our profit. By the end of the first 9 months, we had captured 20,290 billion Colombian pesos as a result of this program, with an execution of 101.5% with respect to what we had anticipated for this year. So this is above the budget. As to operational excellence of 2.290, half of it, a little bit more than half, 10 trillion, and that's in areas of high incidence, reconditioning of maintenance, optimization of frequencies, of integrity evaluation, and also commercial management supervision. So that comes from that figure. The second most important component has to do with strategic supply, which accounts for 25% of synergy captures, 5 billion, and with the renewal of the insurances in the negotiations, and also savings in the way in which we optimize the software updates and better fees in that area. 1/5 of this, 4,170,000 administrative efficiencies, mainly that is through a better energy consumption, a reduction of traveling expenses, optimization in staff contracting efficiencies, in fees, savings, in taxes and contributions. So I would like to highlight these programs because at that level of detail, control of cost and expenses, we are achieving important results which have enabled us to be above our budget, in addition to the attainments we've had when it comes to negotiation of financial expenses. As to KPIs, September 2023, the initiatives that we had budgeted 95% on track and benefit realization of 135%. We also have an acceleration plan focused on asset management initiatives, digitization of the maintenance process, and change management through cultural evolution. By September, we had already met the goal for the year, but we continue working on this front in a positive manner. Now let's move on to the second chapter of this report on results. Here, I would like to emphasize our social footprint. And I would like to start with natural gas and electric power. We are bringing well-being and quality to 20.5 million people. We have 6 million customers on which we have an impact, families of 3 to 4 members. So we benefit the lives of 22,500,000 people, serving 1,030 populations in Colombia and Peru. I had previously mentioned that this year we have been able to connect more than 380,000 new users, residential, industrial, commercial. If we take a look at the detail, we have the 41,000 of those 380,000 were of income bracket 1, 40,000 in Peru, 30,000 income bracket 2 in Colombia, 53,000 in Peru, and 24,000 of income bracket 3 in Colombia, 55,000 in Peru. In Colombia, we have increased the access to 25 new populations or towns compared to the same period last year. And in Peru, we have increased with 5 new towns or villages. So we are very good at selling grids and connecting households in different areas, and that's an area of expertise of Promigas. As to our inclusive business, Brilla, even though the financial sector in Colombia is facing challenging moments, given the quality of credit portfolio, we still show a very favorable performance in Brilla. We have been able to place 367,000 new loans. So we are talking of 950 billion Colombian pesos. Last year, we closed in 1 trillion Colombian pesos, but this year it's 915,000 billion. So this year we're going to comply with our goal, and with an advantage. We have not experienced defaults in the portfolio. The average portfolio is above 90 days, and it's right now at 4.3%. That, if compared to last year, we were in 3.7%. So it shows a light deterioration, which has been controlled, and it cannot be compared to that of the financial sector. Today, Brilla's business account for 20% of EBITDA distribution. It is worth highlighting that of all those loans, 95% are taken by families in income brackets 1, 2, 3. I mean, and we have more than 1.7 million beneficiaries. Sure, Brilla insurance, and that 67% of the loans granted in 2023 have been for women. We have now a Brilla app, which is being used by over 46,000 customers. So of all those credits, we have that 46,000 customers were through the Brilla app. Something important about the social footprint. what we are doing in strategic social investment. And there, I want to mention that by the third quarter 2023, we have already achieved a strategic social investment above what we attained in 2022, which means that you see the figure there that we invested in pesos, 4.9 billion pesos. And of that budget, we have a very important component, which are third-party resources. In other words, we are moving resources of other organizations which believe in the execution capacity of Promigas and of its foundations. We want to finish the year with 45 billion Colombian pesos of strategic investment above the budget, which was 38 billion. So we feel very happy in terms of the impact on the communities with these distinctive programs, more youth employment, more entrepreneurship, more productive communities, more sustainable territories. We have benefited over 41,000 people, and we have a high percentage which are of high impact. We have a presence with our foundation in 45 municipalities of Colombia, 11 departments of Peru, and in Peru, 10 districts. When we take a look at our social footprint, we must recognize that we have a high impact on human talent and supply chain. We have 2,142 direct employees, 8,949 workers through our service providers. And in Colombia, in Peru, we have 234 direct employees. 38% women, 62% men, 47% of women among the population under the age of 30. We have invested 3.5 billion in direct training. And there you have also the figures in scholarships for employees' families. One of the most important milestones of the third quarter that in this group, we consider that this is a contribution of public good to the country, and it's the IMPE launch. It's the Energy Poverty Multidimensional Index, IMPE, it's its acronym. It has been welcomed by analysts, by the communities, by scholars, by the industry, and by policy makers. So this indicator helps us to see who lacks access and quality to gas, electric power, and also in the use of devices where they can use electric and gas devices that will enable them to make the best use of energy, as was said by Marshall Sen, Nobel Prize of Economics. This indicator was launched not too long ago in Colombia. We have 9.6 million people that are poor from the energy standpoint, and 42.1 million are people non-energy poor in 2022. So you have that 18.5 are poor in energy, 81.5% are not. So of that 9.6 million people poor in energy, they have 46.9% energy poverty intensity in different areas. In having a functional and safe home, because they have the devices in order to make good use of those devices, or they cannot communicate with the world because they do not have connectivity, they have no internet, they do not have television that enable them to communicate with the world, or smartphones to communicate with the world. or because they do not have the adequate environment at home. They do not have a place to cook. They cook with firewood outside their houses, or because they are not in an area that enables them to have well-being. So here you can see 18.5% that are poor when it comes to energy. This is different from other poverty indicators. It shows that 3.5 million people are poor from the energy standpoint, but they are not income poor. They are just energy poor. Or it shows the figure that 6.2 million are energetically poor, but they are not multidimensional poor, as has been shown by the survey conducted by our statistical entity, DANI. Hence, we believe and we highlight this contribution made by Promigas hand in hand with the foundation and with ESA, and it has been welcomed by the multilateral community, which want to support us in bringing this index not only to the municipalities and departments in Colombia, but outside Colombia. Well, I'm going to close this chapter regarding decarbonization roadmap. We are meeting the goals set out in our path towards decarbonization through a solid structure and measurable plan to ratify commitment to net zero. And as of September 2023, we had exceeded the goal for this year. Our goal was 10,000. So right now we have exceeded that goal. And at September 30th, we already had 11,317 tons of CO2 that were not part of the emissions. So many, we have the 12 initiatives starting in 2022, mainly, but they are being executed in 2023: energy efficiency, integrity of assets, energy contract management. As of the third quarter 2023, the abatement goal set for the year was exceeded, achieving a cumulative total of 11,370 tons of CO2, partially ending in September, related to leak detection and control, energy supply management, vent management, improvement of response time in case of breakages by third parties. So that is what we are doing to improve our performance in these fronts towards the end of the year. I'm going to close the second session, and now I would like to give the floor to Achilles, our CFO, so he will continue with the financial figures. Thank you, Juan Manuel. Special greetings to all those that are listening to this report today. As it was mentioned by our CEO up front, we have a budget base zero. So our attempt is to exceed expectations regarding the compliance of the budget. And we are over-executed this, as it was mentioned. We are in such a complex year as this one, not only for the sector, but for the economy in general. We are focusing on operational efficiencies and cost reduction in order to close the year with positive results and to continue adding value to our investors. This is how, before I start presenting financial results, we would like to emphasize that these show a responsible execution of costs and expenses and the capture of efficiencies. We have isolated non-recurring impacts, such as construction margins, investment received. And when you take that, for example, in 3T 2022, we have extraordinary income for 14 billion Colombian pesos. Part is the insurance indemnity that we ended up receiving this year, and 31.8 billion pesos in a Reficar indemnity. But when you remove those elements, the EBITDA show a growth of 7%. So now we are going to explain the performance of our financial statements, having mentioned what I just said. The profit and loss statement, as to income, it has a growth of 92%. revenues 97%. And if we do not consider extraordinary income, just the recurrent one, it will be an increase of 12% in income, reaching 1,900,000,000 something billion pesos. Versus the figure of last year. Cost and expenses, based on what we just mentioned, 93% of budget execution, given the control that we have had, an increase of 9% as budgeted, and an increase of 11% without considering non-recurrent events. We have an over-execution in income caused by less income in Gases del Pacífico and Promigas Peru as a result of the delay in the fishing season, which is an element highly related to El Niño and La Niña phenomena in Peru. And it gives rise to some important income peaks in generation in that country, and over execution in the construction of Promisol, given adjustments in the activities. With respect to the variation of 2022, the income of ordinary activities resulting in an increase of 12%, operational income increased mainly by Gases de Occidente, given that the third quarter the consumption has increased by cement companies and thermal generation, given El Niño phenomenon, which had a positive impact on the quarterly revenues of Promigas. As to the distribution of power generation in Cauca, we have more income because an increase in the energy tariff because of climate seasonality. In cost and expenses, in spite of the increase of 9%, we are within 93% of the budget. That's regarding our reading in cost and expenses was right. And even though we intervened to create some or produce some savings, and this budget over execution is given the corporate control, there is an increase versus the previous year, which was impacted by CO, given the availability in the stock exchange. And in addition to that, an increase in Promigas, given salary adjustment and contracting of new consultancies, mainly for the new businesses. This effect has been counteracted because of a low concession construction cost. As to the EBITDA, 105% of the budget. We insist on our idea to comply with the budget. And as we previously mentioned, if we subtract the non-recurrent events for 2022, the EBITDA will present an increase of 7%, reaching 576 billion pesos. So this over execution of 5% is given the responsible execution of cost and expenses, and hence the efficiency capture with respect to what was expected. Moreover, a significant over execution of the spec EBITDA, our Port El Callao in the regasification plant, given the requirements of the thermal sector, highly dispatched because of El Niño phenomenon, which reflects the strategic role of the plant to strengthen the energy mix of Colombia. With respect to the variation versus 2022, there is a slowdown in the EBITDA because an extraordinary income for the loss income immunity for the amount of 14 billion pesos. In other words, 2022 had an income, an extraordinary income of 14 billion pesos as insurance indemnity. That is something that we don't have in 2023. Nevertheless, it means something very important, which is the recognitions of insurance company of one of the most relevant accidents that Promigas has had in its history, or of any of its affiliates. Without taking into account this income, we have a 7% increase in EBITDA when we compare the pure operation of the company in its transactions. Likewise, we see the effect of increasing costs and expenses at a rate slightly above income as a result of the deployment of the strategy of energy solutions, mainly solar energy, and the strengthening in aspects related to cybersecurity. The variation with an increase in concession constructions is of 7%. When we look at the consolidated profit and loss statement in the third quarter 2023 versus third quarter 2022, the net profit has been made 100%, an increase of 15%, only a 4% if you consider only non-recurrent events. And this is the focus of the third quarter. As the final line of our financial statements, we see a slight over-execution because of the indemnity of 50 billion by Promoriente, which is the result of the damage. And that's a payment by the insurance company that was budgeted for August, and it was received in July. With respect to 2022, this item shows a reduction because of a reduction in financial expenses and an increase, and the debt of Promigas by the end of 22, which is the result of a corporate finance strategy in order to counteract the possibility of financial liquidity in the market and to honor the commitments and also to comply with investment plans. The variation will be of, it will be 4% instead of 15% if we take out the indemnity. When we take a look at the summary of the consolidated financial statement, third quarter 2023 versus the third quarter 2022, if we see the revenues, we comply in 97%. 8% of increase and 12% without, if you take out the extraordinary elements of 2022, cost and expenses were met in 93% with an increase of 9%, but 93% of the budgeted. The EBITDA, we says 105% budgeted in our plans and programs, an increase of 7%, excluding extraordinary items, and the net income, 107% of the budget, reaching in that specific quarter 250 billion. Now let's move on to the consolidated, 2023 versus 2022, we met 97% of the budget, an increase of 7%, and without consider the extraordinary amount, an increase of 15%, reaching 4.7 billion pesos against 4.4 billion of that same semester last year. At that budget level, there is an over-execution by Promigas Peru and the Pacific gas plants because of less volumes, because of delay in the fishing season. Likewise, we also have some delays in Promisol. As to the variation of 2022 extraordinary events, that shows a relevant increase, 14%, and we have higher income, Promigas and Gases de Occidente, because an increase in the consumption of industry and our program Brilla. Moreover, we have higher income in SPEC because of an increase in availability income and because of a higher regasification volumes delivered that were dispatched, given the impact of El Niño phenomenon, which reflects, as I previously mentioned, the strategic role of the plant for the benefit of the country's energy mix, an increase because of the price in the price in stock exchange, and we have less construction of gas pipelines given the anticipated compliance of the expansions in infrastructure for gas distribution contracted with the Peruvian government. As to cost and expenses, we have met 92% of the budget, an increase of 13%, and mainly the over-execution is due to the fact that in the case of Promigas, we have had savings in consultancy, and also the consultancy in cybersecurity versus the budgeted ones for non-financial entities, less consumption in compressor units because of delay in El Niño phenomenon, which was presented in the first quarter with much emphasis, less maintenance cost in Gases del Pacífico because of displacement in maintenance in networks without affecting the safety of the networks. We've had better expenses in SPEC because of a less representative rate in the market, and that has an impact on the expenses of the floating unit for storage and regasification purposes, and that's captured in dollars. Pending consultants in Promigas, Peru, Gases de Occidente, and Surtigas, and also as part of the corporate control program of cost and expenses, we still have something pending there in order to protect financial statements with respect to the previous year. The main thing is the salary adjustment in all the affiliates, also an increase in insurance, a renewal of policies, and there's also the reflect of less construction cost. As to EBITDA, we have 105% of the budget, 4% if we exclude extraordinary items at the budgetary level. There is an over-execution of 105% of the EBITDA because of the responsible control of cost and expenses and of the efficient capture regarding what was expected, execution of 92% with respect to the previous year. We have a drop in EBITDA, which was impacted by the growth in cost and expenses because of inflation, mainly in Promigas and the transmission lines. And because of regulatory effects, the WACC was reducing the expected return rate in our transportation income and 15.02 in real terms before taxes. And the tariff was translated into Colombian pesos for the first time in transmission. The variation without income because of construction, Mila, and the refinancing of Reficar and Promioriente will be of 4%, reaching 1.7 trillion Colombian pesos at the EBITDA level, consolidated. As to the net profit, and 107%, 153 billion pesos. And this is due to the fact that we highlight this over execution as the responsible execution of costs and expenses, and also the insurance to Promioriente above what was budgeted for that period. More net profit of SPEC over executed by more days of regasification that we have already mentioned. At last, we have a higher income because of an increase in rates within the strategy that we deployed to minimize the negative carry of the debt contracted to comply with financial obligations and cap. As to 2022, this item accumulates the impact of a lower EBITDA and a higher financial cost because of an increase in interest rate in CPI and IBR and the new debt of Promigas and the strategy that we've mentioned in order to minimize liquidity risk in the financial sector or financial market, and the increase in rates in 2023, which was not expected to be as high as they have been. So with this strategy, we have the resources to responsibly assume financial obligations and investment plans set for this period. In the summary, you can see what we explain: an increase compliance, income 7%, cost and expense of 30%, EBITDA minus 3%, net profit of 21%. EBITDA, it's 105% of the budget. And this represents the compliance of what we established for programs and plans, and an increase of 4% versus last year. We don't take into account the income or any other extraordinary event. Net profit, the execution, 107%, reaching 753 billion pesos. Now we go to individual financial statements. without consolidating this with all the portfolio income, account for 9% of increase if you compare it to the previous year. So that shows a 112% of execution of the budget, 298 billion versus 273 billion of the past year, that's 2022. This over-execution is the result of the increase in consumption by the thermal sector during the last quarter as the result of the impact of El Niño phenomena, producing income for the higher dispatch of the thermal plants of the Atlantic coast. Juan Manuel, our CEO, was saying that we expected for El Niño phenomenon to appear earlier. Actually, it has had a delay. So this had an impact on our financial statements, but to date, we are showing the highest transported volumes in the life of Promigas. Okay, so we have a 13% increase in income. There is a higher consumption in thermal plants because of El Niño phenomenon compared to last year, which had higher rainfall. The impact is not higher because the fee meteorology decreased the WACC, and it specified the tariff. As to concession contracting projects, it would not be 9% as expected. The participation amount has an increase of 16% negative in this case, and that's due to the fact that Promioriente had budgeted for August the indemnity from the insurance company given the emergency in Gibraltar for 55 billion pesos, and we received it during the second quarter for 75 billion. So it's a matter of timing or of opportunity when we register the income, because it was registered in an anticipated manner. We received it in the second quarter, but for a higher value. So less net profit related to the stock exchange exposure and also an increase in higher financial expenses. However, this is offset by the over-execution of SPEC because we have 67 days of regasification versus 9 that we had budgeted, serving the requirements of the thermal sector, highly dispatched because of El Niño phenomenon. Cost and expenses were, it was executed in 104%, an increase of 11%, and this is mainly due to the consultancy for the development of new businesses offset by labor costs that were budgeted in 2023 that are still vacant, and also the less consumption of fuels in compressor stations and the strict control of this item in order to capture efficiencies. As to 2022, the increase is explained by an annual adjustment of 14.72, taking into account the CPI of 312 that was agreed by means of the collective bargaining agreement of our employees, and consultancy of new businesses in other geographies, the cybersecurity contract, in order to offer more protection to our cyber operations. The adjustment in the scope of shared services, the increase in material damage policies because of an increase in the market and the increase of insured value of assets, higher value-added tax resulting from increase in expenses and less cost in terms of concession construction. As to the EBITDA, we see an increase of 101% versus the budget, which indicates that we are executing this well. Many of the explanations have been given already, so we can adjourn saying that the net profit is 96% of the budget. And if we move on to individual financial statements accrued to 2023 versus 2022, we are complying 100% of the budget, and we have also given the explanations in the previous slides. If we go to the last slide of the summary, we can see the cost and expenses are 98% of the budget, an increase of 10% versus what we expected. The EBITDA has dropped 12%, 5% without taking into account recurrent events or extraordinary events, and we are executing 106% of the net profit budget. And then there you have the amount. So these are the notes on the balance sheet. There are no relevant changes. I mean, if you've read our report, you can take a look at this. So this is the end of the financial chapter. So now we are starting the Q&A. The first one, Florencia Mayorga de MetLife, the short-term debt continues increasing. Can you give us some idea on how are you planning on refinancing it? Thank you, Florencia, for your question. Actually, there is no increase in the short-term debt. The thing is that based on the reclassification of long-term to short-term, you see there an increase. We have had a break this year waiting for the behavior of rates. So this year we haven't issued bonds, and we are considering the possibility of having stable rates at certain level, which will be the market reality, to consult with our board of directors and to go over the possibility of issuing bonds the first quarter of next year in order to increase the duration of the debt and reclassify this in the long term. The next question of Jose Rojas of Corpus Group. Given the non-execution of the contract between Canaco and EPM, have you seen the opportunity to substitute gas volumes to EPM? Thank you, Jose, for this question. We want to continue connecting markets, and we are interested in connecting the new supply of gas in the Caribbean, including Antioquia. There are different alternatives to do that in the lower Magdalena Valley with some deposits in those areas, and with the gas we import from SPEC and the gas to be developed offshore. All of these are new medium and long-term prospects. So the interest on the side of Promigas is to continue investing in Colombia and to connect the supply with demand, with the demand side. The next question from Florencia of MetLife, which is the exposure of the company to Cana? Florencia, thank you very much. It's 5% of income. That's the exposure to Canacol. Another one from Florencia. Can you give an update of the efforts to renew the capacity that was going to expire in 2023? Yes, Florencia, this year, only 6% of the contracted capacity expires. That is, it's 40 million cubic feet per day. And that's going to be renewed. And some have been renewed already. So without renewing non-recurring contracts for temporary events of the petrochemical sector, that's still to be renewed. It is important highlighting that the life of the contracts will go from 4.6 to 5.6 years as part of the commercial strategy that we are deploying. The next question, Juan Carlos Soler, FIDU Bogotá. What's the impact on the price for customers and household has had the delivery of gas for thermal generators? Here, I would like to give the floor to Wilson Chinchilla, our distribution VP. Thank you, Juliana. Good morning, Juan Carlos. I would like to say that this thermal dispatch, which has been high this year, haven't had such an impact on prices that we have in our areas of influence with our distributors. And that's basically because these contracts cover 100% of the demand of our customers, whether household, industrial, or commercial. And these contracts were negotiated some years ago. So the prices have been agreed. Hence, this year we do not have a tariff impact. Thank you, Wilson. The next question, Ricardo Rios, independent analyst. I would like to know which could be the impact on the company and eventual decision to import gas from Venezuela. Thank you very much, Ricardo, for this question. I think that for the country in general, to have all the levers available to serve gas demand is positive. Not only the import through SPIC, but it could be done from other markets. As we all know, as of 2026, 2027, we are anticipating a gas deficit in Colombia. So to have available multiple sources is positive. If the gas will come from Venezuela, we can transport it through our transmission system, mainly the one from Ballenas to Cartagena. It will be benefited from this. So this will be a positive impact for the country. And also the fact that we will have gas at a different price. Today, the imported gas bought by the Grupo Térmico, since they have contracts in the spot market, they have established prices. I think it's $16 per million BTU. So if the gas from Venezuela comes at a more competitive price, it will be beneficial to all Colombians. So it doesn't only have a positive impact on our infrastructure, but for our distributors or for the whole country, it's good to have a gas that will compete with the other one. The next question from Ricardo Rios, independent analyst. I would like to know if you can offer us guidance for the fiscal year 2023 with respect to income and EBITDA. Achilles? Our expectation with respect to the guidance is a compliance of 101% in income, reaching 6.7 trillion Colombian pesos. EBITDA, 101% compliance with 2.3 trillion Colombian pesos, and the net profit, 1 trillion pesos with the execution of our budget. That is our commitment and our expectation based on the data available when we prepare this report is a compliance of the budget 100% in the items just mentioned. The next question from Lucas Howard from Redial. How much does SPEC represent in the EBITDA of the transmission sector? The EBITDA of SPEC is 14% of the transportation EBITDA. The next question from Christian Fera from Balance. Are you considering hedging operations for the dollar debt? Thank you. We count on a hedging strategy for the dollar debt. We cover it with financial assets in dollars, which we have in Peru, and SPEC that manages currency, functional currency in dollar, and also the hedge accounting. So we are not hedging with derivatives. And for any additional debt, we have the capacity with this strategy in order to cover financial statements with this strategy of the debt in dollars. Right now, we have no exposure. We are with 100% hedge regarding the dollar debt. The next question, Jairo Zárate. Can you indicate the future impact on the company's business regarding the hydrogen project? Thank you, Jairo, for your question. As to hydrogen, we are going over 4 market segments: blending, which pilot was inaugurated last year in March 2022. So it's been operating for over 1 year with interesting results from which we have learned quite a lot. The second market that we're looking at is that of electric mobility. Then decentralized operation to distributed generation. We are carefully following up the law 1215 that requires 2% blending with hydrogen. So I mean, we're already learning from the blending project, and we already have the blending. In the blending and in the mobility with hydrogen mobility, the current project that we have in Cartagena, this becomes a platform, one in which we can grow in a quick and expedite manner if the regulatory and legal framework are materialized regarding the pending drafts. So we're waiting for good signs in order to put this in place. The last question, Christian Fera from Balance, as to the new bonus of $200 million for Bria, do you have an estimate on the rate? Thank you, Christian. With IFC, we have entered into a letter of instruction to explore the possibility of issuing a bond related to Bria with a social impact as a model of non-financial inclusion of up to $200 million. We are waiting to see if market conditions take place, but the level of detail is yet to be defined. We're working on it in order to materialize it once we have the window of opportunity next year. But it is very good news, mainly the interest shown by IFC in such an important project and such an interest project because of its social impact, and to count on the coaching of such an important institution. The rate is not there yet, and we'll look for the window of opportunity, the most adequate one. No, what you have said, Juan, is very good. Right now, we have a lot of uncertainty. We are in the first stages of negotiation with IFC, and we want to see how all the processes evolve. It could take 3 to 4 months, and when we issue this, we'll have to see which are the market conditions. Well, thank you very much. It took more than 1 hour, and we want to thank you for being with us during this almost hour and a half. And thank you very much for the questions, which are always very timely. So we continue with our commitment of continuing delivering the best results to our investors and to the communities in which we operate, and to continue benefiting those communities and investors. Once again, thank you very much. So we hope to listen to you again next year for the results of the fourth quarter. Have a great day.